this is where we're headed. We're making a card based on this one. So it's going to look similar, but obviously I'm using different colours today because I don't like doing the same colours all the time. Sometimes I will, sometimes I like to be just totally different, but this is the layout that I'm using, okay? And I'm using just 2 stamp and die sets. So the main one I'm using is the multi-layer garden rose. You're getting 4 dies, which cut these out. You're getting 11 stamps here and 4 stencils, okay? And then I'm using the nested stitch bubble squares as well. Okay, so the best way that I've found to do this is to stamp first and then stencil, okay? Now you do whichever system works best for you. For me, I prefer to stamp first and then stencil. I have done both ways and I find it's more accurate if you stamp first and then stencil. But I'm going to line up my stamp using the stencil, and then I'm going to stamp my image and then we'll get cracking on the stenciling. Okay, so I'm lining this stamp up with the edge of my stencil. Alright, so I know that this outline here is the stamped image, and if that is just marginally inside or on the top of that stencil, I know it's going to be in the right place. Okay, so let's just lift that stamp off there and then move the stencil out of the way. Now, doing it this way, you can manipulate your card and your stencil to cover your stamped image. If you do it the other way, then you've got to rely on your eye being really, really good to line up your stamp with your stenciled image. Okay, so let's just ink this up and stamp this down. I'm using a VersaFine Clair because I am going to go in with inks and I don't want it to smudge. Okay, I'm just going to re-ink that middle bit and that outside leaf. So that's the beauty of using a platform, is that you know that you can put it back in exactly the right place once you've re-inked your stamp. That's better. Then I can take my stamp off, leave that to one side because I don't need that again. Okay, so first layer stencil. Now you can see there that there's a bit of a gap here. So all I'm going to do is just manipulate my card and just move it so that my stencil is covering those stamped lines, and then hopefully I won't get too much white card showing once I've finished all my stenciling. However, if you do get white bits, there's a way around that. Alright, so don't worry about that. I'm going to show you a way around that afterwards. So I'm working with, I did reds on the original, but on here I'm going to be using yellows and oranges. Just wanted to do something a little bit different colour wise. I have done 2 or 3 already that I'll show you at the end, but the colours that I'm going to use now are yellows and oranges. Okay, so my base layer, I'm starting with fossilised amber on the main flower, and whilst it's quite a deep yellow, it's not sunshiny yellow. I did use squeezed lemonade on one, and I found that that was a little bit too, I don't know, there's just not enough depth in the colour for me. So I'm going in with fossilised amber, and I'm using my bijou brushes because for me these give a softer coverage, spread your ink round really nicely. I always start off the card, so coming off the stencil onto the card. Now I don't want any ink on these flowers here, okay? I have inked this one. I'm not doing it today, I've already done it because I just wanted to do the main flower really. So that I don't accidentally go over the edge there and get ink on there, I'm just going to cover that up because I'm going to cut this out in a square. So obviously I don't want ink outside this image particularly. Now don't worry if when you're adding your ink to your flower it goes over onto your leaves, it's not going to make any difference. So I've done the base, and then I'm going to use bundled sage on the leaves. And again, don't worry if the green goes off the leaf onto the flower, because you'll cover most of that up anyway, it's not going to show. And I'm using Lisa's Wonder Brushes. Okay, so I've done the first layer, done my leaves, going to lift that off now. See, now there isn't much in the way of white space showing here. Because we lined that stamp up with that stencil, then there isn't much in the way of white space, okay? And I think it's the best way to do it. I'm going back in with the leaves, and I'm going in with a darker green. This is Rustic Wilderness, which is quite dark, but then I thought the other day, rose leaves can be quite dark, can't they? So I was using sort of Twisted Citron quite a lot, but for me it was a little bit too light, especially as I'm using oranges and yellows in the flower, because I find that if your leaves are too light, then it doesn't make your flower stand out like it should. Okay, so first orange I'm going to use is Spiced Marmalade. So first layer here, well, second layer, but first detailed layer, I'm going in with Spiced Marmalade. And again, I'm using circular motions just so that I know I'm moving all that colour into all those little apertures, because some of them can be quite tiny and quite detailed, and I want to make sure that the ink goes into every little piece of that stencil. Okay, so now I am going in with my Twisted Citron, but only to lift little parts of these leaves. So rather than using it as the main colour, I'm just using it to highlight parts of the leaves. So next layer we're going in with Carved Pumpkin. I'm going to use the same brush because it's just a darker shade of what I've used before. The further into your layers you get, the more detailed they get. Okay, so for my final layer on my leaves, I am going in with Twisted Citron again, but I'm going in quite heavy on this one. And again, it's just to lift the edges of those leaves. So it's going to be where the light is catching those leaves that you're adding your ink now. And again, don't worry if you overlap and end up in the flowers. You're going to cover that up in a second with your darkest orange. So now I'm going in with Ripe Persimmon, which is quite a really dark orange. So this is your final layer. Now, having said stamp first and then stencil, because you're going to get a better match, you might find that some of the ink has gone over the edge of your aperture. I wouldn't worry about that. I would be more concerned about having a gap within the lines as opposed to outside the lines. Are you with me? Because the gaps inside the lines, you can get rid of those, like I'm going to show you in a second. They're easy to get rid of. And if you've gone outside the lines, I think it just looks a little bit more arty, a little bit more of that sort of sketchy finish, as opposed to a pristine, you know, spot on finish that people look for. Never, never, never think after layer 1 or layer 2, don't like it, I'm going to start again. And I'll give you a perfect example of that in a second. Okay, we'll leave that at that. I quite like that. What do you think? I think that's okay. Now, before I move it, before I do anything else, I want to make sure that I've got room to put my sentiment. Okay, so when I cut this out, I want to make sure that I've got room to put my sentiment. Now, on the original one, I used Just Because. Okay, that comes with the set. That's one of the stamps that come with the set. But on this one, I wanted to use Forever Friend, which again comes with the set. There are several sentiments. Forever Friend, Just For You, Just Because, Keep Smiling, Birthday Wishes, Get Well Soon, and then this little cutie here, these kisses and circles. I think they're fab. Just a perfect finishing touch to a card. I think that's a great idea. So, making sure that your rose is going to be in the right place to give you enough room to add your sentiment, just mark out, just sort of roughly, just by putting your bubble square on your card, you can see that you're going to fit in your sentiment there, and you're going to be able to cut out and include the sentiment. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stamp that down before I cut it out. All right, just so that I know it's all going to fit in that square. So I'm going to take that off there, ink that up. Now, I probably should have done this on my platform, just in case it doesn't take first time. But I am going to move the frame, because obviously I don't want that frame to interfere with my stamping. So I'm going to put that down there, hold it down for a few seconds just so the ink transfers to the card properly, she said, fingers crossed, and then lift that up. Okay, so you've got your sentiment stamped on with your rose, and then when you come to cut it out, I'm not cutting it out today, I'll cut it out later, you know that everything is going to fit beautifully inside that square. Okay, then you won't have any problems. If you're going to add a sentiment sort of off the card, then you don't need to worry about this bit. But if you want it as part of your image, then I think this is the best way to do it. Okay, I did say that occasionally you're going to find parts of your image, I'll just move those, that still show some white space on here. You might be totally happy with that. It's not a problem. You can leave it like that if you want to. Personally, I prefer to get rid of that white space. So all I've done is chosen some pencils that match the inks that I've used, and I've added in, I've just gone in with my pencil and just blended in that edge so that you can't see any white space. But if you do it for long enough and hard enough, you can blend it in and nobody would ever know that that is pencil filling in that gap rather than ink. And then you've got no white gap at all where you've, all this is where the line is on your stencil. So here, it's this line here, okay? And that's your differentiation between your leaves and your flower. But if you don't want to see that white space, you can get rid of it, all right? So all I'm doing is just going in and adding in some pencil, similar colour. It might not be exactly the same, doesn't really matter, because nobody's going to notice. They really aren't. Blend your pencils, use different colours, use whatever colours you've got. It doesn't have to be a perfect match, because what you can do is lead your pencil into your inking, okay, so that you've not got a definite line, and then use a blending pencil and just blend it in so that you've got no harsh lines. So you've just got colour in all those white spaces, but you haven't got any harsh lines, so that it looks like you've done what you've done. Are you with me? So you can disguise that, because once you've put that on a card, nobody's going to see it, because it's going to be so insignificant with the rest of the card, nobody will notice. Okay, so just a little tip. You could use markers as well if you wanted to, but you just have to be careful of markers bleeding on the paper. So, you know, use whatever you've got and you can get around that. Okay, So I did some others yesterday while I was messing around, and I've done exactly the same on all of them. I haven't finished this one. I wanted to show you the difference between just the inked part and then the piece that I've actually added pencil colour to. Now I've gone over the whole of this rose because I know that if I wanted to change the colour slightly or darken any colours, I know I'm going to be in the right place because my stencils have given me all the right shading. So it's not going to, you're not going to spoil anything by adding pencil to it. Are you with me? So I did the reds on this one, which I haven't finished. And I started this one. I've done a little bit of the oranges. I've filled the gaps in on the leaves. Okay. And then this one, you won't believe how many layers of blue there are on this one. I did the blues and I didn't like it, and I thought, oh, I'm going to scrap that. And then I thought, no, don't do that. Just add different blues till you come up with a selection of blues that you're happy with. And I think that works. If you were going to send that to a male who likes gardening, what better way of sending that to a male friend than using blues or purples? I mean, there are, you know, the roses are out there in those sorts of colours, aren't they? So there are ways around it. Okay. Now then, this one, the one I did yesterday for my that I'm going to use today, I've gone over this in pencil, all right, and I've gone over the whole thing in pencil. Now you can see here that it has gone outside the lines a little bit. I'm not worried about that, but there is nothing glaringly obvious that says, well, you didn't line that up very well, did you? And that's because I stamped first and then I stenciled. Okay, but as I say, if it works the other way for you and you prefer doing it the other way, then do. It's not an issue. You do whatever makes you happy and whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay, so this is my base card. It's an 8x8 card, and then I've cut out one of the bubble squares. I think I've used this one. Yeah, this one I think, and then the layer in next to it to cut my image out. Okay, so you'll notice I've cut an extra little bit in the middle. I don't like wasting the satin card because it's so beautiful, so I needed a smaller bit, which I'll come to in a second, and I've cut it out of the middle because, let's face it, nobody's going to see it, are they? So put that down in the middle, just eyeballing it, not measuring. You know me, don't do measuring. Okay, so that's my base card, and then I'm going to add this one on top. Okay, now then, small tip, when you're stamping your sentiment, remember to stamp your sentiment before you add these on the back. How do I know that? Because that's what I did yesterday. I was very lucky that I could line it up because I used a block to stamp my sentiment. So I was very lucky that I could actually go back in and line it up without messing it up. So remember to stamp your sentiment before you add your 3D pads to the back of your image. Okay, so that's my main part done. Now you can see here that I've added some of the little pastel dewdrops, okay, but I've used the pastel ones. They come in two colours, the clear and the pastel, and you get 5 different shades here. There's a blue, an orange, a yellow, a pink and a green, and they are gorgeous. There's 150 on here. Just look how they just lift those leaves. I just think it adds just enough to give it a certain something. Yeah, so then I thought, well, I like that, but actually I want it to look a little bit different. So what I did was stenciled one of the buds off the set. So I used this one here, and I've used exactly the same colours. Okay, And then I should have actually put that slightly off centre, and I haven't, because now I've only done half of this, so that it sits over the top of this square here. So just using different colours, how different do they both look? Now the one thing I haven't done yet, which I did on here, was in order to make your image stand out a little bit, I just gave it a shadow, and all I've done is lightly, in circular motions using a light grey, is just go round the edge of this flower and the leaves, and I've done that all the way around. I'm not going to do it all, but just enough just to give that some shadow there. I don't know whether you can see that. It's only a slight shadow, and I'm doing it really, really softly. And all I'm going to do is just go all the way around that flower. I think it's the light, the way the light's shining on it, it doesn't really stand out. If I tilt it slightly, there you go. You can see that a little bit better. But when you look at it in real life, trust me, it does stand out. You can see it better on the red one, but it just gives that flower enough of a shadow to just make it pop on the page. And that's the only reason I've done it, is just to make it stand out a little bit more. Okay, so you can use your inks, but then if you're not happy with what inks you've used, you can either go over them again, like I did. I think there's about 3 layers of blue on here, because I just couldn't get the combination right. And as I say, if you've laid down your colours and you move all your stencils and you think, don't like that, don't throw it away. Walk away from it and go back another day. You might find you change your mind completely. But if you don't, go over it again with another set of inks and just change it up until you're happy with what you end up with. I'm not 100% happy with the blue one. I'm happier than I was. But if I then go over this with blue pencils, I can change it up again completely. So, you know, the choice is yours. You do whatever you want. But for me, stamp first, then stencil. And I don't think you'll go far wrong with that. Have a fabulous weekend. Stay safe. Keep smiling. Bye for now.